Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for a special report. I have an article today that I was reading that I received from a friend, and it was really interesting, definitely applicable to many of the topics that we've been discussing. And I guess I could possibly, review the whole thing and give you something to think about. We will have the article available afterwards so you can review it. And this was written by this gentleman by the name of Bernard Eastland. And he, it was an American physicist, died in 2007. So I'm not really sure exactly when this article was written, but was at MIT, which so many of them go to MIT. I mean, if you look at the who's list of any type of science and technology, and these people all have a connection to MIT. So here's the article. It's called Nazis Play This: HAARP, Black Manchurian Candidate and Tesla Technologies. Maybe some of you have already seen this article. But anyhow, Ghetto Informant Program and Oakland's Black Manchurian Candidates. So in 1967, as part of the overall effort of the Cointelpro, the FBI developed a network and list of some 4,000 black collaborators assembled from what had previously been codenamed Top Level, or TOPLEV, Black Community Leadership Program, to inform, disrupt, and aid in obliterating the Black nationalist and civil rights movement in America. The FBI's Black Pro, or Black Program, called the Ghetto Informant Program, was the list of its over 7,000 new collaborator recruits. So we're talking 1967. From these networks, I suspect that individuals were carefully selected from the list and new collaborators by other governmental agencies such as the CIA, Operation Chaos, which also began in 1967 for top-secret classified MKUltra projects, and then by stealth and deceit mercilessly turned them into guinea pigs. They became experimental subjects of some of the most far-reaching technologies of the 20th century, such as the Tesla technologies. Former U.S. Air Force Sergeant Seibrin Flenaw Jr. and his brother Ronnie's timetable to begin the Black Manchurian Candidate also began in 1967 with the inception of Ghetto Informant Program and Operation Chaos. In 1967, Seibrin and his brother Ronnie were culled for trauma-based mind control classified programs. And in 1967, Ronnie most likely balked. He said that he didn't want to commit treason. He tried to get out, but he knew too much and got in too far to withdraw, and he was abducted from the streets of Berkeley and poisoned with MKUltra hallucinogen drugs and driven insane. According to Seibrin's wife, his mental state also began to deteriorate. In 1967, at the time that Ronnie was abducted, in 1969, he had disappeared into Alaska. Just prior to Ronnie's assassination in November of 1971, he had disappeared into Alaska with his brother in the site of UCLA's High-Power Auroral Stimulation Observatory, which is HIPAS or HIPAS, and the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program, HAARP, HAARP. George H.W. Bush and the Third Reich 1,000-year master plan. Seibrin Flenaw Jr.'s deadly spree was politically opportune. It occurred just after the close of June 1988 California presidential primary race of former CIA Director and Vice President of the United States George Herbert Walker Bush. The senseless slaughter and maiming of innocent white people by a deranged, out-of-control black man had sensational political ramifications that, at least indirectly furthered and aided the Republican Party's law and order platform and agenda of fear-mongering, and propelled Bush as a strong-arm fascist president into the White House. So here is the instigating, it looks like manipulation of race wars. All right, so we'll go to the next paragraph. On his deathbed in 1999, Adolf Hitler's personnel commando, the Sturmbannführer, SS Otto Skorzeny, had some very interesting and chilling things to say about George Herbert Walker Bush and the Nazi secret master plan. Before the end of World War II, Hitler, Himmler, and the SS master plan devised a series of historical events that, on the surface, and would appear to be everyday happenstance occurrences, natural disasters, man-made diseases, active murder, assassinations, terror, manipulation of money and energy supplies, contamination of foods, pollution of natural resources, and war. Through timing of these events, patience, careful planning, and cooperation from others in positions of trust, stealth, and deceit, they would acquire power over the United States and the world through fear-mongering, population mind control, deception, concealment, selected assassination of national and world leaders, and war. According to Skorzeny, as part of the master plan, he and George Herbert Walker Bush were instrumental in merging the NAZI SS intelligence with the Office of Scientific Intelligence, OSI, to form the CIA with the Wild Bill Donovan and Alan Dulles. He said that George Bush was actually an NAZI SS agent and spy implanted in the United States as the son of Prescott Sheldon Bush. George H. Scherf Jr. Became the 41st President of the United States as George Herbert Walker Bush, and George H. Scherf Sr. from the NAZI's Germany master plan was Nikola Tesla's trusted assistant. Furthermore, he said that Prescott Sheldon Bush was the double agent who worked primarily on behalf of the Nazis' SS apparatus that controlled the German central banks, who in turn controlled their counterparts on Wall Street in London. P.S. Bush, aka George H. Scherf, stole Nikola Tesla's technology and robbed Tesla blind, Skorzeny said, and that it was Reinhard Gehlen and himself who murdered Nikola Tesla on January the 6th, 1943, by strangulation suffocation. They stole his blueprints, plans, and records and delivered them to Hitler and the SS. Thereafter, Tesla's technologies became part and parcel of the SS Knights of the Black Sun master plan for world domination. Nikola Tesla and the origins of HAARP. The Earth's atmosphere is divided into three major sections: the troposphere, which is sea level, the stratosphere, and the ionosphere. For over 50 years, the U.S. military have been studying ways to understand and control the upper atmosphere as a military intelligence strategic plan. Their strategic defense initiative research projects involve the sky are commonly referred to as Star War technologies. HAARP is an ionosphere heater system based on the research of Nikola Tesla. Tesla is a name not commonly found in history books, but Tesla's name resonates throughout the U.S. government and its interest in the developing technologies, not only to control the global weather systems, but mind control vast populations anywhere on the globe. Tesla's technologies involve the manipulation of visible universal electromagnetic forces. Tesla's technologies resonate throughout the military-industrial complex in developing non-lethal weapons and Star Wars technologies. Tesla's symposium and conferences are quietly held throughout the world. The meetings are highly technical, secretive, and highly classified. Tesla technologies also have very broad implications involving earthquake, contrivances, world radar, particle beam weapons, and brainwave manipulation. Tesla technologies have the potential of destroying planet Earth. HAARP, this is a quote, HAARP will not burn holes in the ionosphere. That is a dangerous misunderstanding, that is a dangerous understatement of what HAARP's giant gigawatt beam will do. Earth is spinning relative to thin electric shells of the multilayer membrane of ionospheres that absorb and shield Earth's surface from intense solar radiation, including charged particle storms and solar winds erupting from the sun. Earth's axial spin means that HAARP, in a burst lasting more than a few minutes, will slice through the ionosphere like a microwave knife. This produces not a hole, but a long tear or an incision. And these are the things that we've talked about before, of having some of these tears in our atmosphere. Tesla was of Serbian descent, born in Yugoslavian village of Smiljan. Tesla attended the Technical University of Graz, Austria, and the University of Prague. In 1882, Tesla was employed with the Continental Edison in Paris, in France, and in 1880s, Thomas Alva Edison developed electrical power system based on direct current, or DC, technologies. In 1884, Tesla migrated to New York. He continued his employment with Edison's organization. Tesla was an electrical engineer, genius, and inventor. Tesla and Edison became fierce competitors. In about 1886, Tesla opened his own laboratory in New York. Tesla invented and perfected the alternating current, or AC, electrical systems. Tesla acquired 45 U.S. patents in electrical alternating currents. Tesla invented the incandescent bulb, which Edison took full credit for. In the 1880s and 1890s, Tesla worked with radio frequency electromagnetic waves. Despite the claims made by Guglielmo Marconi in 1874 and 1937, he was actually Tesla who did much of the most basic pioneering work in radio frequency technology. So in 1885, George Westinghouse, head of the Westinghouse Electrical Company in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, brought the patent right to Tesla's polyphase system of alternating current dynamos, transformers, and motors. By the turn of the century, the state of New York electrical power system was based on Tesla's AC inventions. And you could see that, he's also very connected to Niagara Falls and the use of water and power and energy. General Electric was formed by Edison to lease the rights to use the AC patents in the Tesla Westinghouse held to light up the world. Tesla's research lab was located on the grounds of Wardenclyffe on Long Island, now called Shoreham. And on Wardenclyffe, Tesla constructed a 180-foot high-power radio frequency transmitter and antenna. He claimed that he can transmit energy waves and messages to any point on the globe. Some believe that the Tunguska event, the June 30th, 1908 massive explosion in Siberia, was the result of Tesla testing the power of high-power radio frequency transmitter. Makes you think about a lot of the different disasters that have happened around the world after seeing that statement. All right, so then getting back into the article, the force of the blast at Tunguska has been estimated to have been equivalent to 10 to 15 megatons of TNT. The blast flattened 500,000 acres of pine forest and was heard over a radius of 620 miles. Nevertheless, Tesla touted the destructive power of electromagnetic warfare, and on April 21st, 1908, days before the Great Tunguska event, Tesla wrote a letter to the New York Times, which stated, "When I spoke of future warfare, I meant that it should be conducted by direct application of electrical waves, without the use of aerial engines or other implementations of destruction. This is not a dream. Even now, wireless power plants could be constructed by which any region of the globe might be rendered uninhabitable, without subjecting the population of other parts of serious danger or inconvenience." In 1934, Tesla announced that he would create a space shield around the United States to protect it from enemy missiles, rockets, and planes. And that's quite interesting. We've talked about, and I've heard many people talk about shielding the entire planet. And they have talked about doing that, creating different kinds of grids and so forth, or even blocking the Earth from the sun, which is the new thing that has been mentioned by a few different people, such as Bill Gates and maybe a group I think that he's working with from Harvard. All right, so Tesla also claimed that he would zap enemy missiles, rockets, and planes right from the sky with a death beam. And I remember there was a big discussion about that too, that the military was talking to him and they were interested in his technology, but I think they went with some of the technology of that Einstein had been talking about. So getting back to the article again, on September 20th in 1940, Tesla announced that he was ready to divulge the secret of Teleforce and Death Ray and his invisible Chinese wall of defense to protect the United States. Sava Kosanovich was a distant nephew of Tesla, who he allegedly detested, and on the day of his death, Kosanovich, a man associated with RCA, a writer for the magazine Popular Mechanics, and a locksmith, gained entry to Tesla's room. They broke into Tesla's safe, and the cover story is that instead of the NAZI's removed Tesla's research papers and materials involving the death ray in the wireless transmission of the electrical current. So there's speculation then of who actually took all of his documents, and often people blame the NAZIs for a lot of things. Just it's easy to do that. But anyhow, the FBI discovered that Kosanovich was a Yugoslavian minister of the state representing the government in exile. In 1941, the NAZI, Germany, and the Axis power invaded and occupied Yugoslavia. The FBI believed that Tesla might have been working in secret experiments for the Yugoslavian government in exile. And during World War II, Tesla wrote a letter to the U.S. Congress that he had an invention, a particle beam weapon which could end the war. But they essentially disregarded him and his claims. The Yugoslavian government in exile was very much interested in Tesla's invention to defeat the Nazis and end the war and occupation of Yugoslavia. But before Tesla could spare the invention with them, the Knights of the Black Sun killed him and stole the blueprints. On January 7th, 1943, Tesla was dead and penniless in a cheap hotel in New York City. I actually visited that location and was able to see that room where he stayed in. Tesla's possessions were literally seized by the government. J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI allegedly. Tesla's possessions included trunks which held his papers, were turned over to the U.S. custodian of alien property for safekeeping. on January 9th, so we're looking at a few days later, 1943, federal alien control agents went to the hotel, seized all the remaining property of Tesla, consisting of about 2 truckloads of materials. They sealed all the articles and transferred them to the Manhattan Storage and Warehouse Company in New York. The FBI notified the Department of Justice, offices of Vice President Wallace, Office of Scientific Research, and the Military Intelligence Division about the seizure of the equipment, experiments, and research of Nikola Tesla. The belief persists that the FBI and the U.S. government will possess and secret valuable working papers of Nikola Tesla, and it is also generally believed that the Soviet Union's interest in Nikola Tesla's death ray, in wireless transmission of electrical current, in Tesla's research ideals, intensified after the U.S. dropped 2 atomic bombs on Japan in 1945. The Soviets took Tesla's research in electromagnetic radiation, EMR, seriously, while the U.S. toyed with Tesla's idea as the mad scientist, science fiction ramblings until the end of World War II, when the Knights of the Black Sun used Tesla's technology as another bargaining chip with Allies forces. Tesla's possessions were eventually inherited by his nephew, Kosanovich, and housed at Nikola Tesla's museum in Belgrade, Yugoslavia. It's interesting that they called him the mad scientist, but Russia took him serious, and it's quite interesting how things have turned around. Tesla's magnifying transmitter, the TMT, the Moscow signal. In 1952, Soviet scientists held a series of secret meetings in collaboration with scientists representing the United States at the Sandia National Laboratories in New Mexico. These meetings dealt with the Soviet proposal to exchange information regarding the biological hazards and safety of electromagnetic radiation. The Soviets were well ahead of the U.S. in EMR, electrical magnetic radiation, research and development. The Soviets may have sponsored the meetings with the U.S. to covertly access the knowledge of EMR. Due to their ignorance of the subject, the U.S. scientists downplayed the significance of the EMR and its hazards, and that played right into the hands of the Soviet. Shortly after the meeting, the Soviets began directing microwave beams called the Moscow signal at the U.S. Embassy in Moscow. In 1962, the CIA discovered the Moscow signal bombarding the U.S. Embassy. The CIA brought in an outside consultant, Dr. Milton Zarrett, and codenamed the investigation Project Pandora. Dr. Zarrett found the Moscow signal was composed of several different frequencies, which was directed straight at the ambassador's office. The Moscow signal remained secret for a decade. Monkeys were brought into the embassy and exposed to the Moscow signal. The monkeys developed blood composition anomalies and unusual chromosome counts. Embassy personnel were not informed of the Moscow signal or its harmful effects until about 1972. Stoltita, a major Soviet newspaper, reported that Viktor Sedletsky, a scientist from Kiev, claimed that the practical testing of the new kinds of weapons based on the impact of certain frequencies on the human body occurred back in 1965. The U.S. government began to examine the effects of the Moscow signal. The job was turned over to the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency, as you know it as DARPA. DARPA is now developing electromagnetic weaponry. The man in charge of DARPA operations, Dr. Jack Verona, was allegedly to be so important and so secretive that he didn't even return George Bush's telephone calls. Dr. Jack Verona, the Raven, was listed as a defense witness in the People vs. Flenow. Dr. Verona was the head of the DIA's Scientific and Technical Intelligence Directorate, who simultaneously ran a DIA mind control program called Sleeping Beauty that dealt with the offensive use of microwave weapons. In 1967, Dr. Valerie V. Hunt of UCLA, probably the world's foremost electromagnetic radiation EMR human effects researcher and Tesla technologies expert outside of Russia, entered Agnew's State Mental Hospital near Stanford University to conduct experiments on hapless mental patients. The National Institute of Mental Health, NIMH, CIA, MKUltra institution, underwrote her research, which more than likely was clandestinely study the effects of the Moscow signal using mental patients as human guinea pigs. During their research, or her research and experiments, Ronnie Flenow was a patient of the hospital and possibly became one of her experimental EMF Moscow signal guinea pigs. At the time, Dr. Hunt was also working for Sturmbannführer SS Dr. Werner von Braun's National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA. Nikola Tesla had developed a revolutionary electropropulsion anti-gravity technology, among others, that the NAZIs were very interested in exploiting. As early as 1934, SS von Braun had become directly involved in Tesla's technologies and at Los Alamos, New Mexico, in a secret project called P2 between 1936 and 38, under the director of Werner von Braun, on leave from the NAZI Germany, had come to the New Mexico on the invitation of the American Rocket Society, the Smithsonian, and the Simon and Florence Guggenheim Foundation to work with Dr. Robert Goddard at his laboratory in Mescalero, New Mexico. Tesla apparently agreed to work on the German project after he had offered the technology to the U.S. government on several occasions and was treated like a lunatic. He had been led into the project under the idea that it was for peace in all mankind. In 1988, Dr. Hunt publicly revealed at a psychotronics mind control machine conference that she had been covertly experimentally bombarding human beings with ELF mind control frequencies. Dr. Hunt was one of the first in the U.S. to bombard human beings with electromagnetic high-frequency radiation, EHF, causing disruption of human nervous systems. The experiments were probably based on the Tesla magnifying transmitter, TMT, that the Russians were perfecting with the Moscow signal. Dr. Hunt and his colleagues at UCLA, Dr. W. Ross Addy of the University of California's Brain Research Institute, a CIA MKUltra mind control contractor, was also one of the first to conduct research on EMF and brainwaves, confirming that brainwaves could be extrained to externally generated signals. The U.S. Navy underwrote his research. An aura, or AURA, is the electromagnetic energy field that surrounds, encompasses, and permeates the body as well as all living things. The colors and the patterns within this field, this energy field, constitute a blueprint that results in the energy we radiate from our feelings, thoughts, and physical being. The first aura photo was taken by Nikola Tesla in 1891. Many of you have had those, it's kind of a new age thing. You go and get your aura taken to look at the colors and see, what your emotions or feelings or your energy field looks like. And so, it looks like Tesla was the first one to do that in 1891. The USSR expanded on this work through the development of the Kirlian photography, and by 1975, UCLA researchers Thelma Moss and Valerie Hunt were measuring the aura with Tesla technologies and the precise accuracy for the CIA. During that time, G.H.W. Bush was the director of the CIA. In parapsychology, Thelma Moss worked directly with the CIA mind control maestro, Dr. Louis Joylin West at the UCLA Neuropsychiatric Institute. According to Alex Constantine, one of their subjects was whelmed by a back-to-back psychic experience. She realized but precognitive dreams that had to be fed to me. Biotelemetric subjects routinely complain that their dreams are commandeered. For 15 years, she walked through a barrage of novelty effects. The psychic episode gradually gave way to torture, included head pain, endless hours of persuasive coercion, the art of psychological paralysis honed by the CIA and the prison systems. In 1994, she began to receive nonstop audio transmissions that still torment her, cybernetic voices registering in her brain, primary frequency allocations, and her mental channel. So this is where people have talked about, are you having actual connection with your higher self? Are you communicating with some kind of spiritual interaction? Or is this what some people call the voice of God technology, that this is imposed and some strange things are happening? Now, during this pandemic that we've been experiencing, a lot of people have complained about dreams, and some very, very strange dreams. And so trying to sort through some of this, I think, is what's important, and to identify the difference between what is imposed by some of these technologies or what is actually a natural occurrence. And some of the things that go along with it is these heavy headaches, although it does not necessarily mean that is always the case. But hearing voices and or directives of some sort, I think, is something that shouldn't be ignored, and people should go and seek help the best that they can to help them to differentiate between the two and make sure that everything is going well, because we do know that these type of things are happening, and this technology exists. So moving on, another psychotronic protege of Dr. Hunt. So it looks like Dr. Hunt was involved with a lot of things. In the U.S. Psychotronic Association of the USPA was Dr. Elizabeth Roscher, Director of Technic Research Laboratory in San Leandro, within just miles of Sebring. Flynn Jr., Dr. Roscher of UC Berkeley, had been doing ELF brain Tesla technology research with human subjects for some time. One of the frequencies produced nausea for more than 1 hour. Another frequency, she calls it the marijuana frequency, gets people laughing. Give me the money in 3 months, she says, and I'll be able to affect the behavior of 80% of the people in this town without their knowing it. Dr. Roscher was also an expert in Tesla technology, along with Thomas E. Bearden. She lectured on the introduction to tutorial day of Tesla physics at USPA conference. Tesla magnifying transmitter, TMT, and the Russian Woodpecker. On the bicentennial of the American Revolution in July 4th, 1976, the Soviets began broadcasts that became known to ham radio operators around the world as the Russian Woodpecker. The Woodpecker signal seemed to have come from an early model of a HAARP-like device using a Tesla magnifying transmitter, or TMT. The official Defense Department explanation was that It was over-the-horizon radar system designed to detect enemy missile launches. This is what the over-the-horizon backscatter OTH-8 program, the original occupier of the HAARP site, was intended to be. These broadcast interfering electromagnetic signals were on the 3 to 30 megahertz megahertz bands and were usually pulsed at an on-off rate of 10 per second, which gave the characteristic of tapping, which gave rise to it being called the Russian Woodpecker. On the Zapping of America, Paul Brodius wrote a report published in New York Times on October 30th, 1976, revealed that in recent months, a mysterious broadband shortwave radio signal had been broadcast intermittently from the Soviet Union. The signal was so powerful that it disrupted radio and telecommunications throughout the world. Dr. Zared is concerned that the Russian signal, because of its potential hazard to human beings, it was very clear that such encoding impressed onto carrier wavelengths could have a central nervous system effect. In 1976, the Boston Globe reported that the U.S. ambassador to the Soviet Union, Walter Stossel, developed a rare blood disease similar to leukemia and was suffering headaches and was suffering bleeding from the eyes. Two of his irradiated predecessors, Ambassadors Charles Bolin and Llewellyn Thompson, died of cancers. On the July 18th of 1981 TV show NBC Magazine, David Brinkley revealed to a wide range of television audiences that the Soviets were bombarding the U.S. with low-frequency waves. And on the air he said, as I say, I find it hard to believe, it's crazy, and none of us here knows what to make of it. The Russian government is known to be trying to change human behavior by external electronic influences. We do know that much, and we know that some kinds of Russian transmitters bombarding the country with extremely low-frequency radio waves. Dr. Andrew Mitrowski, PhD, technology specialist with the Canadian Department of the State, president of the Planetary Association of Clean Energy, or PAC, wrote, since October 1976, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republic has been emitting extremely low-frequency signals from a number of Tesla-type transmitters. Their frequency corresponds to brainwave rhythms of either the depressed or the irritable states of humans, and scientifically tenable tests have shown that the USSR signals do lock in human brainwave signals. The USSR signals have been assessed by the Environmental Protection Agency to be psychoactive, liable to produce psychological response and vulnerability in humans. The same agency noticed that the USSR ELF signals can be absorbed and re-radiated at 60 Hz power transmission lines and even by magnified by water pipe grids. Of course, water does magnify things. The Soviets are on the verge of a breakthrough into a new weapons technology that will make missiles and bombers obsolete. It would allow them to destroy up to 5 American cities a day just by sending out radio pulses. They could introduce pain or illness into the whole nations. At least 5 USSR installations were operating simultaneously up to 24 hours a day since July 1976 and the intensity of up to 40 million watts. The Soviet installations were radiating ELF at a frequency which could resonate with neurons in the human brain, and the transmissions could be a carrier wave that could be modulated or varied in amplitude, frequency, or phase to carry a hidden effect for 24 hours a day. You wouldn't have any idea what was going on. In 1976, so this was happening around 1976, and we talked about 1975 with Peter. It's right around that time period that you're seeing a lot of these things happening, a shift in our reality. George Herbert Walker Bush was the CIA director between 1975 and 1976. Seaborn Flynn Jr. had been delivered to the U.S. Naval Hospital in San Diego as a civilian housekeeper, another CIA MKUltra institution. Stanford Research Institute, SRI, and HAARP. During the early 1970s, the S-Factor, Stanford University, the handmaiden of the medical, military, industrial, congressional complex in covert mind control experiments, had also been experimenting with Tesla technologies. In 1974, Dr. Robert Hallowell and John Katsouforis, Stanford University Radio Science Laboratory, showed that very low frequencies of radio waves can vibrate the magnetosphere. A magnetosphere is a highly magnetized region around and possessed by an astronomical object. In the Antarctic, with a 20-kilometer antenna and a 5 kilohertz transmitter, they learned that the magnetosphere could be modulated to cause very high energy particles to cascade into Earth's atmosphere. By turning the signal on or off, they could stop the flow of energetic particles. According to the government sources, the SRI developed much of the high-frequency transmitting programs with money from the Defense Nuclear Agency, DNA, of the U.S. Department of Defense, and the DNA has been renamed as the Defense Special Weapons Agency. Dr. Valerie Hunt's UCLA and HAARP's older brother in Alaska. Playing catch-up with the Soviets, the U.S. began developing its own radio frequency radiation transmitter, Tesla magnifying transmitter, TMT, installations. High Power Auroral Stimulation Observatory, HIPAS, is the older brother of HAARP. The HIPAS, or HIPAS, facility is run by the UCLA Plasma Physics Laboratory and, like HAARP, is engaged in the study of the ionosphere through the use of high-power transmissions. It is located 25 miles east of Fairbanks, Alaska. The HIPAS consists of 8 150 kilowatts transmitters broadcasting from an 8-element circular cross-dipole antenna array. HIPAS operates at 2.85 and 4.53 megahertz and behavior modification frequencies, with an effective radiated power of ERP of 84 megawatts at 2.85 megahertz. Like HAARP, the site also includes several diagnostic instruments. Current projects of HIPAS include experiments in double frequencies, ELF, VLF, extremely low, very high, or extremely low, very low frequency generation, and in ion cyclotron excitation. So that's extremely low and very low frequency, just to correct what I said earlier. HAARP, the Super Skybuster. I look a lot at what's going on with chemtrails and everything too, and you can see the effects of HAARP in these strange configurations and waves in the clouds. All right, getting back to the article. During the presidency of G.H.W. Bush in 1993, Seaborn Flyn's former employers, the U.S. Air Force and Navy, jointly publicly initiated HAARP. And HAARP is the most powerful, versatile, and largest radio frequency radiation transmitter in the world. It has at least 3 times the power of any Soviet installation. The HAARP project sits on a 23-acre facility located 200 miles east of Anchorage and it consists of two main parts: 48 ionosphere research instruments, IRI, and scientific suite of other instruments. And the IRI is a high-power transmitter and antenna capable of producing up to 36 million watts. HAARP can manipulate the radio waves in several different ways, and such an electron acceleration of infrared and other optical emissions, generating geometric field-aligned ionization and using oblique heating to broaden ionosphere enhancement technologies. The U.S. Navy can also generate extremely low frequencies, ELF waves, which allow communications with submerged submarines. That's interesting. So you see it goes right through water, goes through our atmosphere. Okay, getting back to the article. These techniques can be applied to surveillance. Surveillance of the sky and ground. The system can be used against populations, such as for crowd control. This would be achieved by producing mild to severe physiological disruption or perceptual distortion. How many people are seeing that? You're seeing that in the news everywhere. This disruption and distortion of perception, disorientation. U.S. military documents reveal that this system has the ability to interrupt and exploit human mental processes through pulsed radio frequencies, radiation over large geographical areas. By creating and directing balls of energy at lightning speeds, it could be possible to manipulate the minds of people by altering the electrical energy already present in their brains. Imagine, if you could, the ability of a police force to soothe the rioting mob with a pulse of electromagnetic force, or perhaps the ability to render the crowd docile and subservient. If today's society can be monitored and controlled by means of influencing public behavior, the threat of a highly dominated techno-society is a real prospect. The HAARP project, based on the August 11, 1987 patents of Dr. Bernard J. Eastland of Texas, entitled Method and Apparatus for Altering a Region in the Earth's Atmosphere, Ionosphere, and the Magnetosphere. This patent was filed on January 10th of 1985. On April 11th of 1986, and the Office of the Naval Research sealed the patent application under a secrecy of order which forbade further work or any disclosure of information on this patent. Victor Schauberger, on June 30th, 1885 to September 25th, 1958, was one of the Nazi's Germany's most ingenious scientists. He was brought over to the United States in Project Paperclip to work on with scientists at the National Atomic Research Laboratory, known today as the Brookhaven Labs. Those of you that haven't heard about Brookhaven, that's also another issue. Located in eastern Long Island, which is not necessarily Montauk, but close enough to it. Schauberger, not the NAZ's high priest occultist, was one of Himmler's SS Knights of the Black Sun, according to Joseph P. Farrell's Reich of the Black Sun. Schauberger is concerned with implosion, extremes of temperature gradients, and vorticular motion were coupled with and has his detailed study of ancient mathematical doctrines in occulted physics within ancient doctrines and philosophical texts. In short, Schauberger was the ideal candidate for the SS point of view to lead the projects involved with the areas of physics and esoteric system that were central in the SS ideology. In a nutshell, Schauberger's theories bring us to the very edge of what appears to be wartime efforts, a well-funded and deeply black effort on the part of the SS Do you understand the relationship of the zero-point energy, rotating fields, and gravity? Tesla Technologies. By 1972, the Brookhaven scientists were fully immersed in the Montauk Project, and there it is. And this is what everyone talks about, the secret space program. Many of the disclosures regarding the secret space program and the super soldier projects go back to the Montauk Project. Understanding how the mind works, learning to control the mind, and in turn using the mind to control time. Schauberger's patents, inventions, and ideas were signed over to these working on the Montauk Project, and the U.S. military has incorporated them into different projects, one of them, which is HAARP. In 1970, Flenau's father said that he stayed with him in New York. He told about his son's strange behavior. He said that Flenau would go outside washing the car in raging cold during the middle of the winter. He would also ride his bike through snowdrifts. He described his speech as rambling. He observed extreme passivity in his behavior and emotional withdrawal. His father said that Flenau saw some type of clinician in New York, and he didn't who or whether it was a psychologist or a psychiatrist at the time. Flenau didn't appear to have any source of income. He would seem natural that if Flenau had visited a veterans hospital in New York, his father should have been well aware of that. Was Flenau visiting Schauberger's Brookhaven lab as part of the Montauk HAARP project? Hanscom Air Force Base runs the public effort for the HAARP programs. Kirkland Air Force Base, the Home High-Tech Weapons System, runs the information distribution process. Maxwell Air Force Base develops doctrine and policy for the non-lethal weapons system. And Brooks Air Force Base put together research on the bioeffects of radio frequency radiation. UCLA, Stanford University, Penn State, University of Alaska all work on the project. Atlantic Richfield Company, ARCO, through ARCO Power Technologies Incorporated, APTI, their subsidiary in E-Systems that brought APTI developed HAARP Industries contributions. APTI under E-Systems was then acquired by Raytheon Corporation in a huge buyout. Raytheon is another one of the world's largest defense contractors. I knew many people that worked at Raytheon because of living in around the Boston area. These systems technologies were part of the central nervous system for the nation's intelligence community. 1.8 billion of their 2.1 billion in sales was for classified projects. A large party of the project came from the National Security Agency, the NSA, and Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, and other intelligence agencies. And many of the company employees are former personnel from the NSA, CIA, and military retirees. The company hires people with highly technical backgrounds and the history of working in government intelligence circles almost automatically. Retired Navy Admiral William Rabon, CIA director under Lyndon B. Johnson for years, served on the board of directors. On CBS's 60-minute segment that aired on February 26, 1995, the company was described as an organization operating in the black or white world, an area so secret that the employees were not permitted by law to discuss anything about their work except with those individuals who have an official and need to know classification. E-Systems' core business focused on intelligence, reconnaissance, and surveillance, which includes systems for law enforcement, which can intercept fax messages, telephone calls, modem transfers, video transmissions on a single system, and eavesdropping by the government. Their global positioning system, the GPS technology, satellite-based, can be locate objects anywhere in the world within 1 foot of the object's actual location. Essentially, HAARP's Manchurian candidates, such as possibly Sebron Flennar Jr., John Allen Muhammad, and Lee Malvo, could be triggered any place on the globe. You see, this is what we've been talking about with some of the shooters and some of the other things that super soldiers and those that have already been enhanced have keyed into these signals, and that's why people need to step away from it and ask to be shut down any of these programs so that it cannot access the inner parts of their mind and influence them. At least one source, Ital Iman I, suggests that the death of black nationalist Khalid Muhammad by a brain aneurysm was linked to a HAARP instrument that was turned up the day he died in February 17, 2001. How did he know that HAARP had been turned up? Strangely enough, Iman supports DC sniper John Allen Muhammad from Fort Lewis, Washington, home of the 1st Earth Battalion, as like a message from a high priest, this initiation rite to take the world, especially black people, to a higher level to get our higher consciousness. Was it a coincidence that John Allen Muhammad of the 1st Earth Battalion in his cohort experiment Lee Malvo had an E-Systems global positioning system GPS device when arrested, and they seem to have been triggered by HAARP, remote messaging? HAARP, EMF, entraining the brain. The brain operates within a relatively narrow band of predominant frequencies. The predominant brainwave frequencies indicate the kind of activity taking place in the brain. There are 4 basic groups of brainwave frequencies which are associated with mental activity. The first, beta waves, 13 to 35 hertz, or pulses per second, are associated with normal activity when a person's attention is directed towards normal activities. The high end of this range is associated with the stress of agitated states, which can impair thinking and reasoning skills. The second group, alpha waves, 8 to 12 hertz, can indicate relaxation. Alpha frequencies are ideal for learning and focused mental functioning. The third, theta waves, 4 to 7 hertz, indicates mental imagery, access to memories, and internal mental focus. This state is often associated with young children, behavior modification, and sleep and dream states. This also probably has a lot to do with regressions and meditation. And the last, ultra slow delta waves, are found when a person is in deep sleep. The general rule is that the brain's predominant wave frequency will be lowest in terms of pulses per second when relaxed, and the highest when people are most alert or agitated. Entrain has several non-technical and non-medical meanings, such as to draw away with or alter oneself and to collect transport. Radio frequency radiation acting as a carrier for extremely low frequencies, ELF, can be used to wireless entrain brain waves. Entrainment is the result of external stimulation of the brain by electromagnetic means. An external signal generator can lock onto or entrain brain patterns, overriding normal frequencies of the brain's operation. The outside signal capture retunes the brain and harmonizes the external signal. This causes changes to the brain waves patterns, which causes changes to the brain chemistry, which then cause changes in thoughts, emotions, and meditation, calm, even euphoria. Used unknowingly against an individual, it is a basic mechanism of radio intracerebral mind control. Dr. Robert O. Becker experimented on the early 1960s with ELF by putting the signal on the top of the DC current to carry the ELF signal. In other words, the ELF rode like a passenger on a bus, maintaining its own integrity, but being carried to a specific destination. Dr. Becker tested this concept by using an ELF, 1 to 10 hertz cycles or pulses per second, signal on humans, resulting in increased loss of consciousness among test subjects. HAARP has the capabilities to radiate radio frequency carrying ELF that can draw away with alter or transport brainwaves that can influence brain activity of entire populations. Biomedical instruments incorporated markets, electromagnetical devices used to control or manipulate brain activity. The power level needed to achieve a measure of control over brain activity, as well as small from 5 to 200 micro amps, which is 1,000 of times less than the power needed to run a 60-watt light bulb. The trick for the influence in brain activity is a combination of frequency, power level, and waveform. Research internationally found that the brain can be easily entrained or can be influenced to change states by external electromagnetic fields. Again, the brain can be easily entrained or can be influenced to change states by external electromagnetic fields. The tool for brainwave entrainment include electrical cranial stimulation devices, sound devices, light pulse systems, and large variety of other brain entrainment and feedback devices. Military research looks at brainwaves entrainment technology as a potential weapon system development. The HAARP project could be not only the biggest ionosphere heater in the world, but the biggest brain entrainment device ever developed. According to HAARP records, when the device is built to full power, it can send VLF and ELP waves using many waveforms at energy levels sufficient to affect entire regional populations. HAARP, radiohypnotic intracerebral control, RHIC. The joining of the use of radio transmissions and hypnotism to control a subject is called radiohypnotic intracerebral control, or RHIC. Recall the Tesla technologies have the capabilities to send messages to any place on the globe. The Neurophone device, developed in 1958 by Dr. Patrick Flanagan, can convert sound like waves, words, and music into electrical impulses, which can be transferred to any point on the body directly in the brain, bypassing the ear and associated hearing mechanisms entirely. So it completely bypasses what people are hearing, so you don't know how to, you can't block out what you're not aware is coming in. Dr. Flanagan went to work for Tufts University. As a research scientist at Tufts, he developed a 3D holographic sound system which could play sounds in any location in space as perceived by a listener. That's interesting. Dr. Flanagan's developed an improved digital neurophone. Dr. Jack Verona of the United States Defense Intelligence Agency, DIA, placed the patent for the digital neurophone under secrecy order as a matter of national security. Dr. Flanagan was forbidden from conducting any further research or even talking about this technology for 4 years. Putting voices in people's heads as a means to control or trigger them is decades old. In 1974, the FOIA request produced a document from the Army Medical and Information Agency entitled Biological Effects of Electromagnetic Radiation, which discussed the research of Dr. Alan Frey and others. The document revealed the military was actively researching ways to induce voices inside the brain by use of signal modulation at a very low power densities. Also in 1974, another FOIA request produced a document from the Joint Publications Research Service in Arlington, Virginia, entitled Psychotronics in Engineering by J.F. Schapitz. Sorry, I didn't say the name correctly. Schapitz wrote that the spoken word of the hypnotist could be conveyed directly into the subconscious portion of the brain by means of modulated electromagnetic energy. He believed that he could use this method to program the subconscious without employing any technical devices for receiving or transcoding the messages without the person exposed having any chance to control the information input. The technology, he said, would be used to induce hypnotic states in subjects at a distance, and by using words modulated in the microwave carrier frequencies, human subjects would be conditioned to perform various acts. And there it is. Being able to dictate to the we wonder why the public seems like they're completely out of it, and any type of information where they begin to awaken, they seem to become explosive or very volatile, or just very dismissive and not able to see the facts. And this is we call it cognitive dissonance, but is it something like this? And Peter has been talking about the effects of HAARP being amped up. Now we're looking at 1974, and maybe a little later than that, and where are we now? 2020. Think about the progression of what's been happening. He further proposed a research program to develop this technology. He suggested recording the brainwave patterns induced by various drugs. That's another area that, the influx of drugs in a lot of pharmaceutical drugs, or say pharmaceutical drugs, but not natural growing drugs like cocaine and marijuana, but some of these crafted drugs that people are using on the street. Then beaming these patterns via microwaves at test subjects in an attempt to cause mental disruption in the subject appropriate to the pre-recorded drug. Dr. Schapitz's research was funded by the U.S. Department of Defense, Dr. Jack Verona, and the same folks funding HAARP. The HAARP project is jointly funded by the United States Air Force, the Navy, the University of Alaska, and Dr. Verona's Defense Advanced Research Project Agency in DARPA and the Defense Intelligence Agency. In 1973, at Walter Reed Hospital, and Dr. Joseph C. Sharp, while in a soundproof chamber, heard words spoken to him from outside the room. They used a pulse microwave audiogram, computer simulation of voice, broadcasting from 300 megahertz to 3 gigahertz, and the words reached Dr. Sharp's brain in such a way that he was able to understand the words that were spoken. On the subject, Dr. Robert Becker wrote in 1985, such a device has obvious implications in covert operations designed to drive a target crazy with voices, or deliver undetected instructions to a programmed assassin. And this is, for a lot of people that are opening up psychically, you could tell the difference when there's something coming in that is just very aggressive, trying to keep you up at night, and it's a different tone to it. It's not reasonable. I don't know. I'm not. It's something that I have experienced, but not frequently. but on certain junctures or certain regions that I've been to, that where it's prevalent. According to most of the clinical psychologists that interviewed Seaburn Flynn after the shootings, included that he shot the people while he was in a dissociative state. Paul S.D. Berg, Ph.D., described the dissociative state. It's a kind of splitting where the person sometimes it's described as a trance-like hypnotic. It's used sometimes in the example of what they call in Berkeley as out-of-body experience, where a person through drugs or whatever else is outside of themselves. That's the split. It's a splitting off of the person's awareness from their activity, basically behavior. Dr. Samuel Benson, psychiatrist, provided another very good description of dissociative state as a person is an autopilot, where only his subconscious impulses are working. Dr. Benson concluded that Flynn thought he was only a target shooting. Dr. Douglas Anderson, a psychiatrist, met with Flynn 12 times. Dr. Anderson believed that during the shootings, Flynn was in a psychotic, dissociated, or trance-like state, which is relative alteration of consciousness. He explained that in such a state, which is analogous to an alcoholic blackout or sleepwalking, the conscious part of the mind that involves judgment became suspended, and the behavior in connection to the unconscious. A person only has a vague recollection of what he did. The neurophone has been improved by the Pentagon and military intelligence with the 21st century engineering used in biological compatible signals. HAARP has the capacity to use neurophone technologies to mind control individuals and entire populations. NAZIs do play the HAARP, play this HAARP to create mind-controlled assassins to terrorize masses and polarize the races as part and parcel of the master plan for a 1,000-year Third Reich Aryan world domination. I mean, I think it's more complex than that, and this is, like I said, this is an article that someone had sent to me, looking for, make sure that the credit goes to the right person who actually put this together. And there was a video here, but the video is not working. And so it's under WordPress, in search of Black Assassins. I actually thought that this gentleman Bernard wrote it, but I think he was a part of this. He apparently had passed in 2007. So I'm not sure if he wrote this entirely, but this was quite an article. And I'm definitely stating that I did not write this article, and I'm not 100% sure who wrote it, but many of it rings true to me and to many of the listeners. I'm sure it's quite a stunning way of looking at things, with provided with a lot of technological facts and their founders or inventors and those that governments that initiate the use of these things, including HAARP. I'm sorry if it was wearisome to hear me read through the entire thing. I just felt like I needed to do that. And to further absorb it, I encourage you all, we're going to have a link to this, to actually read through it yourself and really take in the information and give you something to think about. This is the divide between science and spirituality. I also want to remind people that you do have a soul that transcends all things and can communicate with in a divine space, and we're not limited to this. I do suggest that you create some types of protections within your home and maybe amp up a bit with some things that kind of work with protecting any type of these frequencies, and such as orgonite. And maybe some people have some good ideas regarding that. But also, if anyone is feeling like they're having negative thoughts, and they're struggling through some things and feeling like they're losing control in any way, you know how to reach me. We have access to, you can contact me, we can do a private session, we can discuss it and try to help you through that. I know I've worked with others that have had that problem and worked through that, but that's not the primary reason why I did this article, but I do want to offer help to those that are struggling. But anyhow, thank you for listening, and let's stay informed. The highest intention for humanity, regardless of anything that's brought into this planet. Remember that our connection to the divine is greater than anything that there is. And I don't believe in fear. I believe fear opens the door to problems. I also believe in being smart and educated and knowing what's going on around you, not closing your eyes and living on blind faith either. So let's learn to protect ourselves, and also try to understand those around us that may be getting influenced in ways that we can't hardly imagine. It could be a cross-section of many different nations trying to impose certain things, and there you have it, mayhem and chaos. So let's also ask for protection over that as well. Thank you everyone for listening, for your patience. Have a good day.